Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. This is episode number 102. I'm Steve Wyss, and I'm joined as ever by Jonathan Fadugba. Jonathan, my friend, how's life treating you?
Hi, Steve. Hi, everybody. Life treating me well, thank you. It's nice to be on another episode with you. We're in a bit of a rhythm now. We had one episode last week, and we've got a lot of talking points on this show this week, haven't we, Steve? We're going to cover Sweden. We've had a big Champions League result, which we're going to talk about in a minute. We've also had, games coming in Allsvenkan and Eliteserien, which we'll talk about. And also this week, we've got a little bit of a treat for you. We're going to bring you a little bit of the bonus Patreon episode, the betting preview. We're going to bring it into the main show this week to cover it. We're gonna have a little part at the end. Stay tuned for that, where we select a couple of tips for you this weekend in terms of games that we think should be maybe to keep an eye on, or just games to watch in general if you're not of a betting persuasion. Just games that you should, keep an eye out for. So that's the plan for this week, isn't it, Steve? How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. I've been to the beach today, Jonathan. Actually,
you're always in somewhere exciting, aren't you? You do like to mix things up.
I did a bit of bird watching earlier as well, at the National Bird of Prey Centre, a place called Helmsley in the North York Moors, and then I went to Redcar Beach afterwards. So I have to say, some of the birds were magnificent at this centre. I would thoroughly recommend it to anyone who is in the area.
No one could ever accuse you of being boring, can they? I mean, you definitely like to keep varieties of spice of life, as they say.
Absolutely, yeah. Cheeky plug for the North York Moors National Park there as well, as you've got to. But you were plugging Yorkshire Dales National Park the other week, weren't you, as well? So, we're
we're not sponsored by them, but if they do want to approach us, I'm more than happy to plug them. Very, very much enjoy my time there. It's a sponsor-free show, but of course at this moment in time. But happy to endorse that based on what I'd seen. But talking about sort of nature and beauty and beautiful scenery, there was some seriously beautiful scenery tonight in Malmö, wasn't there, Steve? In terms of the result, which we're going to talk about first on this episode, the Malmö versus Ludogorets fixture, the Champions League qualifier, the last stage of qualifying.
Yes, and I think the big shock was obviously them getting past Rangers. I don't think anyone really saw it happening, even after the first leg. Even you were like, your heart was with Malmö, but your head was like, Rangers get the business done. Fantastic that they got past Rangers. Fair play. They put in a hell of a performance with 10 men in the second half there. And, they got themselves ahead in the game, and they made sure they didn't slip up. And, job done. Then they get the draw of Ludogorets, which is favourable on paper. Let's not beat about the bush here. And, a 2-0 first leg win. Shame for Malmö now that there isn't away goals involved, because they would really been in strong position, wouldn't they else? But 2-0 win against Ludogorets. I watched some of this, and it seemed fairly comfortable to me.
Yeah, it was as you said, I think, you're right, isn't it? The last episode we did was just before the Rangers game, and that was a sensational win, 2-1 away from home at Ibrox, at a packed Ibrox. A sensational result, to be honest. I think we should touch on that first, because it was a fantastic result coming from behind with 10 men as well to win that game. Really, probably I think you could argue it's one of the biggest, one of the best results in Swedish football for many a year. Maybe, for Malmö, certainly since the last times they've been qualifying for the Champions League. Obviously, they knocked out Rangers 10 years ago, and they were sort of shades of a repetition of that. But to go through, Bonke Innocent was sent off, and they still managed to get through. I thought it was honestly a brilliant turnaround. Kolak was sensational in that match, and really it was for them to, Kolak scored twice, and for them to really turn that game around, what I was quite surprised about. I said on the show, I thought my heart was with them, but I thought my head said Rangers would get it done. And when it was 10 men, I thought, no chance, that they're toast basically. But they turned it around, 2 goals from Kolak, and they Lionel Thomason, who, by the way, we might talk about him in a minute, but he is really growing on me. He came out after the Rangers game, and he said, everybody in Sweden knows about Malmö. Everybody knows what Malmö FF stands for and the mentality of this team. But he said, now tonight, maybe more people around Europe know about Malmö. The way he said it, just so nonchalant. He was like, everyone in Sweden knows about Malmö's character. Like the mentality and the character. He's really building this sort of this big team, if you know what I mean. Like he's building something with this team, I have to say, and it carried through into the Ludogorets game. I mean, listening to his words after Rangers, honestly, I was ready to play for him. The way he sort of bigged up Malmö, I was ready to go and get a Malmö shirt. The way he talked about them, it was really like inspiring. Kind of, this is Malmö FF. You know what I mean? This is what we are, and I was lapping it off, I have to say. And I'm not necessarily a Malmö fan by any means. But I try and stay neutral in that sense. But the point I'm making is he really was inspiring, and they've done it again tonight. He called the game before the match. He said it's the 180-minute final. He said this is where we're going to stand up and make men of ourselves type thing. He called it one of the biggest games Malmö have had in years. There's millions and millions of pounds at stake here, Steve. Against his Bulgarian side, at least a minimum of about 16 million pounds at stake for the team that qualifies here. Malmö's already made about 10 million roughly from UEFA for getting this far. When you take into account all the gate receipts and TV money and everything like that, they've already made a decent chunk, and now it's going to be another 70 sort of 80 another sort of 10-15 million pounds if they can get to the group stages with that's not taken into account the just for being there, not even taking into account winning games. You get a certain amount of money for winning matches. You get a certain amount of money for being in the market pool. Obviously, they'll be the only team in Sweden in the competition, so they get the full market pool. So this is, money-wise, this is huge for them. And they got the job done, Stephen. They are a really good side, Malmö, I have to say. We'll talk about them in a minute in the league, because I think they have taken their eye off the ball in that sense, but they're clearly saving it for the Champions League, because this is massive for them. They need to be in the latter rounds. And you got the first goal with Berman Savic, who we'll talk about in a second. Really well worked set piece. Malmö are really, really good at set pieces these days. They really are getting marginal gains in many areas. Didn't have the best of possession. I mean, Ludogorets 58% possession in this game. But Malmö dominated shots wise, 17 shots to 4, 6 shots on target to 3. And the second goal could end up being crucial. It was Joe Ingeberget, a man I know you have sort of not exactly been fond of in the past, but he stepped up again in this match, and it's 2-0 going into the second leg now. They've got 1 foot in the Champions League group stage proper.
Yeah, I mean, I think for those listening, don't underestimate how hard it is for teams to get into the Champions League group stage from the Champions path and the league path, actually. A lot of berths for the Champions League are automatic in. I mean, 16 teams come from La Liga, Premier League, Bundesliga, and Serie A straight away. So that's half of the groups are automatic that way anyway, and there's others as well. To actually get to this stage, I mean, Malmö have played a lot of matches. Their coefficient is not too bad, but they still have had to, they've had to grind through this quite a lot, haven't they? They've avoided Red Bull Salzburg in this final round, that was the big dog to avoid. It was either them, Dinamo Zagreb, Ferencvaros, or Ludogorets. And I think you would take any of the other 3 realistically, wouldn't you? But they've avoided Red Bull Salzburg. They've got this nice draw. Now what have they got to do now? Are you confident they will see the job to its conclusion in Bulgaria?
Yeah, I think they will. I think they'll get it done, Steve. I think they got a bit between their teeth now. I think they really, really are determined. I mean, Andreas Christensen, they've just got leaders in every area of the pitch, and I think Thomason's really built. I wasn't sure about his track record before this job. I'll be honest. In terms of a lot of roles he's had as kind of he hasn't really had a landmark kind of job so far in his managerial career, where you can pin your hat up and say he's done this. He's had a few jobs in the Netherlands and obviously Denmark assistant manager, but he's really proved himself in his time at Malmö. I think he's taken them from Uwe Rosler level, where they couldn't get the job done in the league. To me, he's taken them to the next level. Now I'd be really shocked if they don't get it. Don't bear in mind, of course, away goals don't count anymore. So, it could end up maybe going to extra time if Ludogorets can pull it off. Ludogorets, they didn't look to me like a bad team. They're quite organised, and determined, but Malmö just had a little bit more edge about them. I think they just had one or two sort of more influential players. Christensen, like I said, I think, there's talk tonight that this was his best game in a Malmö shirt. And he was exceptional. There's a few other players who can sort of stand up and be counted. Berman Savic, I'm sure you can ask me about him in a minute, but he's proven himself now to be next level, really. I think the two signings of Kolak and Berman Savic have just been incredible. I mean, Kolak's just been called into the Croatia squad now for the next games internationally. I don't think he's got many caps before that. Without checking it, I think he's only got one cap for Croatia, maybe, or less than 10, certainly. So to get back into that Croatian national team is a massive thing. And that just shows how good he's been this season. He's been, the goals against Rangers were just brilliant. The way he took both goals really was world class in my opinion. Especially the second goal I thought was fantastic. And they've just got these big game players now. Kolak said before the match, this is what I live for. That was a direct quote. They really want this. And it reflected in the way they played on the pitch. They were determined. They were disciplined. They were focused. And yeah, I'd be really surprised now if they let it go from here. I think beating Rangers was the big one that I didn't really quite expect. But listen, we'll see what Ludogorets are made of. They're a small team from Razgrad. They've had a massive leap from the sort of, I think, third division to the top divisions of Bulgaria. They have been in the Champions League group stage twice before. And Europa League 5 times, so they have a bit of a track record in Europe. They know how to get the job done, but I think Malmö will get it done. And just on your point there, Steve, about like you say, it's no joke getting to these stages. And I saw a quote from Dirk Kuyt the other day saying that I think it was Sheriff who they also had a really good win from Moldova, and I think Dirk Kuyt reportedly said that they don't deserve to be in the Champions League or something like that. But you got to bear in mind you've got to come through a lot of games. To get to this stage in the Champions League. Malmö have played a lot of games to get where they are now. So I really don't buy this idea that, don't forget that they are the champions. They've had to come through Riga. They've had to come through HJK. They've had to come through Malmö. That's going to be 8 games to get to this level on top of winning their league. And as far as I'm concerned, if this is a Champions League, quote unquote, then you can argue that the Champions Path should be a little bit easy for these teams.
It's bullshit. I mean, I like Dirk Kuyt, but I think that's bullshit. There's only 6 spots available. 4 spots for the Champions Path and 2 spots for the League Path. The League Path involving, I think, Monaco, Shakhtar, Benfica, PSV. I mean, that's 4 teams there. You'd say, all 4 could probably be in the Champions League, but 2 are going to go. In the Champions Path, Red Bull Salzburg are in this final qualifier. It's brutal. They've made it really hard for teams to qualify for this the top table. It's because there's so many automatic spots given to the top leagues, and that's where it comes. It's because Premier League got pissed off, didn't it, when only the top 3 went and the 4th place had to qualify. It's teams like Liverpool or Arsenal or someone. Arsenal back then, Arsenal would dream of it now, wouldn't they? Worrying about having to qualify for the Champions League. They want the top 4 in, and that's what it's become. And you're right, it's absolutely no joke reaching this phase. Like any team, Sheriff, Dinamo Zagreb, the lot of them, Ferencvaros, full respect. Ludogorets, full respect to them.
Yeah, and the thing is as well, like you said, and you're spot on. And I'm not a massive, advocate of Dirk Kuyt. You might like him, but I think it's just ignorant, really, comments, because everybody was up in arms about the Super League, weren't they? Oh, how can they do this? And then all of a sudden you're saying that teams like Sheriff don't deserve to be there. I think it's just out of order. And really, why when you look at the imbalance of European football, people are worried about, teams getting too big, PSG, things like that. The only way to get rid of that is to stop giving these teams free entry to the Champions League every year. Now we know that's never going to happen because they have so much power within UEFA that, they're never going to give up those places. There's already talks when the Champions League reforms in 2024. Now they're going to give 2 guaranteed coefficient slots. So you might not even qualify from the top 4 of your league, and you might get a place just for having a good coefficient. So now, in years to come, if that does pass, I heard it's under review. But if it does pass, you could have a situation where Arsenal, for example, finish 8th and still get into the Champions League because they have a good coefficient over the years, or a team like that, whoever, could be Napoli, whoever, AC Milan or whatever. I think that's just totally unfair. And if you really want to rebalance these leagues, you need these sort of teams in it. And I personally would advocate for less of those sort of top 4 sides and more teams like Malmö and Sheriff. Personally, I think that would rebalance European football a little bit. It may imbalance their domestic leagues, and that's a debate we can have in a minute, in terms of Malmö. Because if you look at it, if Malmö get that Champions League money, I mean, as I've said, you get €2 million roughly just for winning one game in the Champions League group stages. You get 900,000, I think, for a draw. Now that's on a level of some teams' budgets for, if you look lower down the table in Allsvenkan, the Champions League budget is almost their entirely yearly budget just for a couple of wins, really, if you look at it. So we can have that debate in terms of the balance of the leagues, but in terms of sporting merit, I totally agree with you. I can't see how you can dismiss these teams. They have so much work to do to get here, and Malmö, they've done it. The Ludogorets coach came out after the game and said they did not let us breathe for 1 minute. Thomason described it as almost a perfect game. He said they executed the game plan to almost perfection. So yeah, it's a real. They're really happy at this moment in time. They've got one last step in Bulgaria, and they can be cautious but optimistic that they could make it to the Champions League.
Do you know, I almost prefer the qualifying for all the European competitions than the actual main events these days. It's just, I mean, I'm just looking at some of the scores here in the Young Boys 3, Ferencvaros 2. You've got Frank Bolly, ex-Star-Beck player, bagged a brace of goals there. That's what it's massive for these teams. But yeah, just before we move on to the Malmö league form, key players who really stood out for you in this Champions League run.
Yeah, well, I've spoken about Antonio Kolak in the past, and by the way, I agree with you. It's a bit, I find the early knockout rounds great. I wish it was a little bit more covered on in the UK in terms of TV coverage with more games, maybe, because I do think there's so many intriguing storylines. But yeah, the one storyline in Malmö at this moment in time, Steve, that we have to talk about is Veljko Birmančević. Now, this is a guy who wasn't sure about him. And I remember the preseason podcast. I was a little bit I had done my research, but I didn't know a huge amount about this player. But I have to say, he is he might not be around too long in Allsvenskan, to be honest. Again tonight, he scored a cracking goal. He was described by one of the commentators on C More, which is like a broadcast network in Sweden, as a £10 million player. Hasse Bakker described him as a £10 million player, the 23-year-old Serbian winger. He said obviously he was praising the set piece, but he said Birmančević, the way he moves from a forward position, moves in and out of the zones, the way he wanders into outer zones, makes himself playable all the time. He's a very important cog for Malmö in their attacking game and the build-up. And he said, as far as I've seen in Allsvenskan, he's 100 million SEK, obviously, Swedish krona player, which is roughly about 10 million, I think 10 million euros. And he said he thinks he can be a top player, basically. Now, this guy, 9 goals, 3 assists in 19 games for Malmö. He's turning up numbers that are incredible, really. There's someone I really advise following on Twitter. I don't know if he listens to the podcast, probably not, but a guy called Marcus Bring at MarcusBR22. Now, this lad, I don't know if he is actually Swedish, but he posts like radars, those kind of like stats radars. And he's done one of StatBomb on Birmančević, which is really interesting. Non-penalty XG 0.37, shots per 90 2.89, touches in the box 5.17. Passing accuracy is not great. It's around the 68% mark, but he's an attacking player, so you can let him off on that maybe to a certain extent. Successful defensive actions per 90, just about 6. Wins 2.15 fouls per game. Attempts 8.42 dribbles per 90. Progressive carrier, passes into the box 4.83 per 90. 4.83 per 90, sorry. XG assisted 0.23 per 90. This is a player, Steve, who is just doing it in all areas, not just only progressing the play, dribbling, getting into dangerous positions with his passing as well. but he gets assists. He's got 3 goals, 2 assists during their Champions League qualifiers. If you look at it, his goal contributions, 0.92 per 90 at this moment in time. He's averaging goal contributions. That's goals and assists. Now he is really, really looking good. And if you add Kolak on top of that, Kolak's one of the top. He's the joint top scorer in Allsvenkan at this moment in time. They've really found 2 potent players, and you have to give a lot of praise to Malmö's recruitment, because it's not only, they are the big dogs. Everyone's kind of, maybe there's some little bit of worry here and there. What will this do to the league and that kind of thing if they have so much money to spend next time. But you can't knock the recruitment that they've pulled out, because those were 2 players who weren't hugely expensive, but they're pulling out top performances, and they're almost taking them to the next level, and that is Champions League level. So yeah, I've got to give a shout out to Berman Savic. He's been outstanding.
Yeah, fair play to him. And it's an interesting one long term. It's like you don't want a league to go down the same route as what Bayern have become in Germany, or Juventus at one point became. But I'm not sure it's always going to happen in the Scandinavian leagues these days, because I think any really good players end up just coming out of the league, and it can be hard for teams to adapt. And it's really hard for Malmö to juggle between domestic and European matches. And that's going to be a problem. Whatever happens in the second leg, that's going to be a problem for them going forward, because they'll be in Europa League group stage then. But in the league themselves, they've given hope to the opposition. 0-0 draw against Halmstad, and a defeat at home to IFK Gothenburg. And as I saw this result and I was stunned. Been a bit of a serial slagger offer, haven't I, of Mikael Stara, but he's come up with the goods here.
Yeah, and he had the bingo wings on I think it was on the in the last game. You should see the way he celebrated the goals for IFK. Proper shaking his arms, like flapping about. He really loved it, pumping his fists when Marcus Berg equalised for them, and obviously a 98th minute winner. This was a real story. So we'll talk about the balance of the leagues. We'll talk about that in a minute, because there is some interesting points around the transfer window which we'll touch on. But for now, moving on to sort of that IFK game. That was a massive game, Malmö IFK. I do think they have. I mean, this is a byproduct of their focus on the Champions League. I do think they've taken their eye off the ball a little bit in terms of the league. The last few games haven't been too successful for Malmö. They as you said, Halmstad, and then losing now at home 3-2 to IFK. That was a shock result, really. I did not see that coming whatsoever. I'm glad, if you're a punter, I'm glad he went on that game, because we've been critical of IFK in recent weeks. Now they've got 18 goals, 18 assists. 18 goals, 18 conceded in the league exactly. So from 15 games, they've got a identical record, basically 4 wins, 7 draws, 4 defeats, 18-18. So pretty sort of a symmetrical league record. They're in 9th now, but massive win really. They needed it as well, because if they'd lost that game, they'd be 12th. So they'd be just above the relegation zone really. So it's quite tight down there, and that 3 points is pretty big. It takes them above Varberg, Halmstad, and Degerfors. But when you're looking at IFK, they should really be above those teams in general anyway, and that's why we've been a bit critical of them. But 3rd defeat of the season for Malmö in 15 games. We are at halfway point, and it was a really, really good sort of end-to-end game. Kolak opened the scoring, absolute howler from Oscar Wendt, back pass. Kolak was onto it like a flash. The guy is a bit Mandzukic in that way. He's really sharp. Actually, Kolak. Rounded the keeper and put it into the net. He pounced on it in front of the fans. Marcus Berg then equalised in the 17th minute. Erik Larsson then scored an own goal, which gave IFK the lead in the second half. And then Malik Abubakari, 86th minute, he thought he'd rescued a point for Malmö with a bullet header from a corner. Another set piece for Malmö. Really, really good header, his first goal for the club. And then, he thought the drama was done, but 98th minute penalty. Tobias Sana stepped up coolly and buried it into the back of the net to give IFK all 3 points. And this was a really lively game. There's some fans back in the stadium. We had 6,000 in the Ludogorets game for Malmö. Thomaston and others said it felt like 60,000. The atmosphere was incredible, really, the amount of noise they made in that ground. But it was another game with a sort of good atmosphere. They were very quiet in the 98th minute when Sana scored that goal, ran off and sort of slid on his knees, sealing the win for IFK. But yeah, end-to-end game. But as you said, just a couple of just a bit of a blip for Malmö in the league. Just 1 point from their last 2 games. They've now got Degerfors at home next, and then Hammarby away. So they do have a bit of a tough run coming. Hammarby, Norrköping, Djurgården, and then Elfsborg away. So they might time it well, because obviously if they get through, then they can concentrate on the league again. So could be good timing. And it could backfire on them. Only time will tell. They are now down to second in the league, joint with AIK on 30 points, 3 points behind Djurgården.
Yeah, that looks a brutal run. I'm just looking at it. I mean, even Degerfors are no mugs, are they? On the day they can play. So this is going to be difficult now for Malmö to juggle between European and domestic matters, whatever. So do you see? I mean, other teams look like they are trying to take advantage. AIK, Djurgården, Elfsborg. It's how do you see the league sort of shaping up now with this Malmö European dynamic to come?
Well, I think teams need to take advantage of this this period of time for Malmö, because if they get into the Champions League, they're going to have a lot of group games, throughout the rest of the season, basically, because the group stages end in December. I think the league ends. I think the league in Sweden ends in November, so early December, 4th of December it ends. So they'll have 6 extra games to play if they manage to get through, which will potentially distract them. But that's a pleasure they'll love, to be honest. They'll enjoy that. They've strengthened in this transfer window, which is closed now. And I think it's up to Djurgården and other teams to sort of make the most of this, taking their eye off the ball to a certain extent, and see what they can do. Malmö are the top scorers in the league by some distance, 33 goals. It's more than 2 a game at the moment in time, but they do leak. 19 conceded now, 3 against the IFK, as we said. They've conceded more goals than the IFK in the league, in fact, which is quite surprising, really, when you consider it. They've conceded way more than teams like, say, Halmstad, even Kalmar. So they are a little bit leaky defensively. They do like that kind of high-scoring style. And I think that, the team that's really looking good at this moment in time is AIK. We talked about them after the Djurgården game. They absolutely battered their rivals 4-1 on last week's show. Listen to that if you ever haven't listened to that track record in Stockholm derbies. But they've now racked up 5 wins in 6 games, and they're unbeaten in 7 now. Last defeat was against Häcken in July, and they've won 3 in a row now. They beat Halmstad and Djurgården away, and they had a really, really late winner at Sirius this week, and just gone. Bojan Radulovic pounced into the box late in this one to win in the game. It looked like it was heading for a draw. The Sirius manager was absolutely fuming at the end of this match. But they're just showing a little bit of resilience, AIK. They've got narrow victories, mainly, except for that Djurgården game. 2-1 against Varberg, 2-0 against Kalmar, 1-0 against Halmstad, and now 1-0 against Sirius. They're just grinding out wins here and there, and the belief is starting to grow and grow and grow. And I think, they could be the ones that might look to capitalize on this little, poor form from Malmö in league terms. I caught the Djurgården Degerfors game at the weekend as well, and to be honest, I fancied Degerfors. I have to say, I didn't think that. I thought Djurgården would have a bit of a wobbly period after the Mjällby. Excuse me. Made a big mistake there. Mjällby away. I caught the Mjällby away game at the weekend. Confusing Mjällby and Degerfors because they're both, teams that you'd expect to be maybe at the bottom of the league. But I caught this match, and I thought that Mjällby, they're quite a physical team. They get in your face. The likes of Jacob Bergstrom and others are really a tough team to play against. And I thought that Djurgården might struggle, especially with Witry having left. But credit to Djurgården, they dusted themselves down from that terrible defeat against AIK, and they pulled out a win. Stroke of half-time, Niklas Barkroth got a goal. And I think it was a really timely moment to get a goal, really, because the first half, I didn't think they were hugely great. They created 1 or 2 chances, but Mjällby were in it, certainly. And that goal just kind of, they couldn't, Mjällby are struggling, really, in the league. They can't really get goals. But it was a hard-fought win for Djurgården just to keep them top of the table.
Yes. What other results caught your eye from this most recent Allsvenskan round. I mean, the one for me that stands out as a huge shock, Kalmar 1, Halmstad 1. The shock being that Halmstad actually scored a goal. But I mean, that's a good point for them, I suppose, isn't it? But yeah, what else really stood out for you for this round? And actually, before we move on, Kalmar, we got a question in from Vassen. Thank you very much for your question. Where does Kalmar really stand? They're currently in the middle of the table, but the rest of the middle packs are so even right now. Wouldn't mind a deeper analysis of the team, strengths and weaknesses and such. I mean, I don't know whether you can do that this particular episode, Jonathan, but just briefly, where do you see Kalmar standing right now?
Yeah, good question, Wasson. And we always love your YouTube comments as well. So keep up the good work on that front. Always love your support and hearing from you. And also famous Kalmar fan Ovid Pettersson. I'm loving him on Twitter as well, by the way. Yeah, I think I'm not going to do an analysis of Kalmar on this show because it would take a bit more time to do it to real justice. And a bit pressed for time on this show. In terms of their numbers, I can sort of look at that. And I think they're having a good season. I said it on the last show. I think they will. Yeah, I did predict they'll have a decent season this year. I didn't think they would struggle, and that's proven to be the case. So I think they are molding a decent side there. Still quite low on the expected goals front, 16.3, 15 goals scored. So they can improve goal wise. I don't think they're one of the high scoring teams in the league. Östersund's even bottom of the table have scored more than Kalmar, and that is a real area of struggle for them. They're averaging 1 goal a game exactly, and they can do better on that front. Maybe need a goal scorer long term. But second bottom of the league in terms of XG. Östersund's are actually bottom, but have 12.72, but have scored 1 more goal than Kalmar. So it's relegation form in terms of their XG for in fact, but XG against they're fine. They're one of the best teams in the league. In fact, XG against, they're 4th in the table, 16.5 XG against, 16 conceded. So it's pretty uniform actually. Their XG, they're performing pretty much to their standards in both boxes. But yes, that's pretty impressive. Only Djurgården, Malmö, and AIK are better than Kalmar in terms of their expected goals against. So they've certainly tightened that defense. Henrik Rydström has done a good job there, making them a little bit more difficult to play against defensively. And in terms of ball possession, they're the second best team in the league according to Y-Scout, our partners Y-Scout, 56.7% average possession, second only to Norrköping. So they are a team that has completely changed their style around. They like to play the ball now. They're a lot more easy on the eye. If you look at last season, they were bottom of the table in Allsvenskan for possession, 42%. So that is a massive change from 42% to 56.7%. To turn that around in 6 months or so is a real testament to the two contrasting styles of the managers and what kind of game model Rydström likes. We know he likes that game model. He implemented it as Sirius. Sirius last season, if you look at their numbers, they were exactly the same as pretty much as Kalmar in terms of possession. They were the best team in the league for possession. With 57.3% average possession. So it's very, very close to Kalmar's now. But clearly you can see what kind of game plan Rydström likes. So I think they will have a good season. I think they need a goal scorer. And that is really the key if they really want to go to the next level. And you got to look at Niels Froling and say, where will he go? If he's going to get a move. He's kind of the one I look to for goals because I think he's got the ability. Yeah, they're doing quite well, Steve. I don't know if you've caught many of their games.
Yeah, I've caught the odd game. Quite impressed with them. That possession change is like going from Neil Warnock to Pep Guardiola, isn't it? Really is quite stunning, really, I must say. But I know there's a couple of sort of odds and ends you want to tie up before we finish the Swedish section.
Yeah, so it's not been a sort of, you asked me what's caught my eye this week in the league and stuff like that. It's not really been maybe results. There was one result probably. You could say, Degerfors beating Häcken 3-0 was a shock to me. Maybe Elfsborg beating Hammarby 2-0 away as well. We should probably talk about Elfsborg, I think, in a bit. They're in quite a good run of form. And Degerfors, they're having a really good season, to be honest, way above my expectations, and they've battered Häcken really there to move up to 10th. And Elfsborg are only 4 points off the top of the table, by the way. So that they're in a decent run of form, and they haven't been beaten since May at Malmö, so they are really doing quite well. But it's been more kind of like little things that have happened this week. There's been a few bits of controversy, Steve, that we have to probably touch on. I know in Norway there's been some controversies as well, but in Sweden there's been some. It's not been a sort of scandal-free week really. Some unsavory kind of news basically after that IFK Malmö game. So Malmö IFK basically wore on the backs of their shirts, they had a kind of like a rainbow flag motif on the shirt numbers, and essentially what seems to have happened is an employee of IFK Göteborg has been physically threatened by an unhappy fan who's been reportedly unhappy about this sort of equality gesture, and as far as I can tell from the reports, kind of turned up at the guy's house and basically made threats and that kind of thing. So it's quite a serious incident, to be honest, in terms of the backlash of what happened in that game. So it is a little bit worrying. I think the police were called. IFK put out a statement, and it kind of descended from there, because IFK essentially put out a statement sort of saying, we stand for equality, and kind of reconfirming their message after that unsavory incident. And then what basically happened is AFC Eskilstuna, I mean, I don't know who's forgotten to switch their account basically when they made this tweet, but they made a controversial tweet underneath EFK's message of sort of solidarity, and they've been absolutely peppered with ridicule. AFC Eskilstuna, essentially, they've been forced to apologize. They've kind of like had to sort of tail between their legs, backtrack on the comments. There's been like an investigation, that kind of thing. It's really, really backfired, the comment they made. It was kind of like a political sort of comment about a political party and freedom of speech and things like that. So that's the long and short of it. But it's not gone down well at all. And I think there was a bit of poetic justice maybe for a lot of fans in Sweden. I mean, AFC Eskilstuna are generally quite hated anyway, but I think a little bit of poetic justice maybe came in the fact that Eskilstuna have been knocked out of the Swedish Cup as well in the preliminary rounds, so they won't go to the group stages. And I think that's kind of really pleased the fans of a lot of clubs. If you go and look at the tweet underneath AFC when they lost that game to, I think it was Sylvia, which is a small team, kind of like near has links with Norrköping, but it's a lower tier team. There's a lot of happiness that AFC have been beaten, basically. So, yeah, just a few little unsavory things here and there. It's kind of the world we live in at this moment in time. There's people having different opinions on this kind of stuff, unfortunately. And whoever made that comment from AFC Eskilstuna, it certainly was an own goal. But yeah. The more worrying side of it was the police being called for the threats against a member of staff, and I hope that is investigated and dealt with, really, because it is. Hakan Mild, the club director, said it's completely unacceptable, and we strongly disassociate ourselves from this. The person was exposed to threats and vandalism at their own home, which is that is really worrying, isn't it, Steve? I think so. Hopefully it's all sorted, but a few unsavory things there.
Shocking, really. I think that about wraps it up for Sweden, this section. I don't think there's anything else you wanted to touch upon, Jonathan.
Just the one little thing I wanted to mention. We were talking about the balance of the leagues, and what happens if Malmö get into the Champions League? Does that create an unbalance? That kind of thing. Well, there has been an interesting point this week, which is probably worth debating maybe on another show. Let's say if they get there, maybe we'll have this debate. But basically, Hammarby and Malmö have both put forward a request, pretty much formal request, to change the transfer window to have a longer summer window, essentially to allow them to do more business during this summer month. They're not happy about the transfer window closing last week. They want to be able to do more business once they know where they're going to be in Europe. And so essentially, that could be a threat, isn't it? Because if, say, Malmö are now getting the Champions League, they can go out and splash loads of cash, really. And Hammarby have also raised that concern. They want to essentially change the transfer window in Sweden from a shorter winter window. They want to close it a couple of weeks earlier and extend it a couple of weeks later in the summer. So that's something that we may talk about in a future episode, because that really would potentially change the landscape of Swedish football, actually. I know it's a small proposal, but if you look at the potential repercussions of it in terms of what it would do for the teams in Europe, it could help them in Europe, but it could also maybe unbalance the league even further. So one to watch out for there. I don't think there's been any real verdict on it, but it's a proposal that caught my eye. So I think that pretty much wraps it up for Sweden.
That's very intriguing, I must say, and I think we look forward to debating about that on future episodes for sure. But that wraps up part one for episode number 102. Join us after the break, where we'll be discussing Norwegian matters, a couple of talk about some European matches, and also a couple of predictions for the upcoming weekend rounds from both of us. So join us after the break.
Welcome to part 2 of the Nordic Football Podcast, episode 102. We're into 3 figures now, and I quite enjoy saying it. But in part 2, we're going to move to Norway, and we talked about scandals. There's been a few scandals that we are going to touch upon, but for now, let's start with the more light-hearted, easier stuff at the top of the table, because transfer window is still open in Norway, isn't it, Steve? We talked about the transfer window last week. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe to the Nordic Football Podcast. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your show. Just Google Nordic Football Podcast, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, or follow us on Twitter at Nordic Footpod. Because last week we had a long discussion about the transfer window in both nations. It is now shut in Sweden, but it's still open in Norway for a few more weeks. And there's been a few big sort of signings that tie in potentially. So I think we're going to start by talking about the title race, because there has been a couple of big results, haven't there, and also big transfers. Steve, I think probably the best place to start might be Bodø/Glimt, isn't it?
Yeah, and they've had a disappointing year, I think, overall, but they've had some, since getting knocked out of the Champions League qualifier by Lechia Warsaw, they picked themselves up. They got through against the Kosovan side, Pristina, and they're facing Lithuanian opposition to make the Europa Conference League group stages, which they would love to be part of that. But in the league, they had a really important victory, 1-0 against Lillestrøm. And I didn't see it coming. I've got to be honest. Bodø/Glimt have not been playing very well away from home this season. It's been their big Achilles heel. But they legitimately deserve the win. Patrick Berg missed a penalty. In fact, he's missed 2 penalties in the space of a week, actually. That's Patrick Berg. And I thought, this is going to be one of them days where it just doesn't go right for them again. But Botheim, the man, came up with a really big goal for them late on, sort of 10 minutes to go. Really good strike, unstoppable. Got them a 1-0 win against Lillestrøm, ending Lillestrøm's 10-match unbeaten run. So it was a great 3 points. At the same time, Molde blew a 2-0 lead in Viking and lost 3-2. So the gap is 5 points at the top of the table there. But every other side, apart from Molde and I think it's Sarpsborg, have played 16. Every other side's played 15. So they've got a game in hand at Bodø/Glimt on Molde. So if they won that, they'd be 2 behind them. Still got to play them as well, of course. So a good week for Bodø/Glimt. And off the field, they've signed Armel Pellegrino, the ex-Kristiansund player who went absolutely bonkers last year. His time in Saudi Arabia has been cut short. They've signed him on a contract for the rest of the season. I mean, Pellegrino absolutely bossed this league last year in a much worse team. So imagine the chances, and I think he's going to cause all sorts of havoc in this Bodø/Glimt side.
Yeah, it could be potentially pivotal. I saw some comments on Twitter from some people we follow on the Nordic Football Podcast, and kind of saying, is this potentially a turning point in the title race? Because, I remember you saying something like you might even eat your hat or go vegan if Molde don't win the league from here a couple of weeks ago, potentially. I think you kind of had it almost as a done deal. Now, bit of a turn, isn't there? Because it's 5 points now, but Bodø/Glimt have a game in hand. I mean, how big was that defeat against Viking, that late defeat, 90th minute, from being 2-0 up?
Hold your horses, Jonathan. Kaviri Ruan are giving me enough to sweat about with my other vegan claim. I did say the title was done, I think. I don't think anything else was said. But and I still believe Molde will win the league. But they have a problem, and I've noticed it before, mixing European matches domestically at times. And they just had a brutal schedule. They played some good teams like Trabzonspor were good. Before that, they were made to sweat a few times. It will do Molde some good to be knocked out of Europe now. And they can fully focus on the league for the rest of the year. Buda Glimt may well end up being in Conference League. Which for me, I think it'd be a bit alien for them to have to juggle, league and domestic and European matches were that to happen. I think that gives Molde an edge, and I think Molde have got a bigger squad as well. But I mean, 2-0 up against Viking. To be honest, this didn't shock me. Viking are the sort of side who can pull a rabbit out of the hat like that, and they're just so offensively minded that they can score a goal from anywhere. And Molde have problems shutting down games at the moment. Their defence has been poor. We touched on it on the last episode. They have been conceding goals left, right, and centre. Will that settle down now? I think it needs to start settling down. They need to become this more sort of boring side, I think, grind out some results if needed, because that defence has been letting them down. But I think they will come back from this defeat quite well, will Molde. But they've left the door open again. And it's not something you want to do against a Buda Glimt side that if they do get going, like they did last season, then they would be a dangerous creature as well. I don't think anyone else is going to be in the mixer. But Molde have left that door open again.
Yeah, certainly interesting. I mean, you'll know the sort of the bookmakers kind of odds and that kind of thing, how it might change things. But there was a big announcement from the Buda Glimt's social media channels, wasn't there? I mean, they really weren't quite. You don't normally get those kind of Premier League style ceremonial announcements in Norway, really, and Sweden necessarily. Sometimes you do for big transfers, but I don't think I've seen it from Glimt too much. But they really did roll out the red carpet social media wise for this one player, haven't they, Steve? Now you're going to tell us about him a little bit. I know he's a player we talked about on the podcast last season, and he's back, isn't he? Amal Pellegrino.
He's back, and I always knew he would be back. It's just a question of when. I didn't expect to be back this soon. This is a great sign for Buda Glimt, because if you look at their team, the weak spots for me now are in those wide areas. Sondre Surley is ruled out for the rest of the season with a cruciate ligament. Ola Solbakken had a shoulder problem mid-season. He's back now, but I don't think Solbakken's quite been as effective as he was last year. Of course, they're still reeling on. This time 12 months ago, Jens Petter Hauge was still in starting matches for Buda Glimt. So it's an area they need to improve on, that left wing spot. And that is where Pellegrino will fit into the side, no doubt. He can cut inside from that left wing and wreak havoc. He scores a lot of goals. He'll assist as well, I think. He's going to get a lot of chances in the Buda Glimt side. It's a big transfer. They kind of flex their muscles a bit here. This is what happens if you win a league. If you've got a bit more resources, you can get players like Pellegrino in, A, because you can afford them, and B, because you're an attractive proposition. So that signing does give them a chance of retaining the gold medal. They're back in the race for sure. They can't afford to make slip-ups, in the next few matches. And again, I do question, can they juggle Europe with domestically? But they've got Kristiansson coming up next. Then Tromsø in a big derby game. Odd and Viking. The Molde against Buda Glimt game, for those who are interested, it's round number 24, 27th of October. That's penciled in for. So, if they can stay in touch before that game, then they would certainly take that.
Yeah, welcome back to Amal Pellegrino. It's going to be interesting to see if he's a bit of a game changer in the title race. Glimt has scored 30 goals in 15 games, which is okay, but it's nothing like their previous seasons, to be honest. Last season, when they scored an incredible 103 goals, they're going to have to catch up pretty quickly to reach that tally. Halfway through the season now, 15 games played. So, definitely they're going to need 77 goals in 15 games, which I think that's probably too much even for Glimt. But moving on to the bottom of the table. Now, I almost don't really know where to begin with this, Steve. So I'm just going to leave it with you. And by the way, my maths was completely wrong there. So if you know maths, you'll know that I was wrong on that. But anyway, in terms of Glimt's goals. But I'm going to brush over that now and move on, because I'm so flabbergasted by the next topic on the agenda that I almost don't really know where to begin. So let's just say there's been a bit of a bum rap for Brann this week, hasn't there?
Well, let's start with the positives. They won a game of football. A very, very important win for Brann. 3-2 against Sandefjord. Half time they were 2-1 down, and I was tweeting live this game on the NFP account, and they were outplayed in that first half. I'm not saying I didn't see a way back, but I didn't believe they would come back to win it, but they did. They were sharp from set pieces. There was a bit more hunger and motivation, desperation almost at times from Brann. It worked in their favour this time. Sandefjord missed chances and didn't really take the game by the scruff of its neck like they should have done. They got a late penalty, which was converted nicely from Robert Taylor, who said got his inspiration from Jorginho's. He did a little Jorginho run up to confuse the goalkeeper. Very important win for Brann on the field. Off the field, a lot of scandal and controversy, which we'll touch on now. But at the end of the day, it's 3 points, and the fans will be happy about that.
Yeah, and it's a massive 3 points, isn't it? I mean, if you look at it, we're already halfway point in both leagues now, and Brann have gone from they were really, really, really struggling, weren't they? And that win just gives them a bit of a lifeline, hasn't it? The last 3 games, they've unbeaten now in 3 games, 2 draws and a win. As you said, they against Sandefjord, so they've given themselves a little bit of a lifeline after that terrible, 6-game losing streak to start the season. 10 points, to get out of it, they're only 2 points behind Mjøndalen now, and 2 points behind Stabæk. So they are and 4 points, obviously, from Tromsø in 13th place. So certainly doable in 15 games. But in terms of distractions and kind of scandals, well, we can't brush over this one, really, can we? I'm just going to read you the headline in Bergen's Tidninger, which is kind of like the local newspaper, which basically says that BT reporting that a drunken sex scandal at Brann Stadium. Now, if there's 3 or 4 words that are certainly going to raise your eyebrows in the middle of the podcast on Swedish and Norwegian football, I think it's those 4 words probably. So, Steve, I'm going to let you explain it. A group of 12 players apparently met up for dinner. There were 4 female guests in their 20s, according to BT. I think I'm going to let you take it away from there.
Well, this dinner party was arranged. There's been several new players have come into the club, and this is something which was admittedly happened earlier in the season as well. Almost like a welcoming party, an excuse to socialise, team bonding, if you want to call it that, because they need a bit of that. It was under the proviso that no alcohol would be drunk, the players would behave themselves, etc., etc. But things got out of hand, and once alcohol got involved, several players became, in the words of one of the board members, they were drunk, supposedly, went to the stadium afterwards and had a party. There's been rumours of illegal drug use as well. And of course, the main scandal is this so-called sex party where 12 players are caught on CCTV camera involving 7 women as well. So, look, at the end of the day, this is obviously not great for the club at all. And, the manager, Eirik Horneland, described this party as disgusting and, a dark time for the club. So, there has been also some more serious allegations recently alleged or potential assault even. So, look, I mean, I'm not going to get involved in that. I mean, the way I see it is, if everyone is, having a good time and is all consented and, there's a bit of fun involved, then why not, But when it gets more serious than that, it's a problem.
As you said there, I mean, in terms of the timeline of this was actually before they beat Sandefjord. So, I mean, you said things got out of hand. You could argue things maybe got into certain hands, but I won't talk too much about that. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the actual reporting on it, Well, yeah, it was reported that the players arrived at the Brann Stadium between midnight and 1 a.m. and stayed until sort of 5 in the morning, apparently. Reports of them actually going at it on the pitch, on the Brann pitch. Is that the rumor? I think the cameras have caught them. Brann sports manager Jimmy Nagel Jacobson came out and said to Bergens Avisen, "This is in no way acceptable." And he said that the scandalous schemes will have consequences. He said that, it's clear for the 12 involved, there will be big consequences for them. I don't know if they actually played in the game at the weekend. Were they expelled from the squad? Steve, I don't know if you have any kind of updates on that side of it. The chairman and the board said the timing is extremely bad. I mean, this is a side that's a big club, as we've talked about on the podcast. In Norway, this is, I think, on one episode we said they're the Liverpool of Norway, and they're bottom of the league. And then for this to happen, it's almost like desecrating the pitch, isn't it? But I mean, to be fair to them, they've sown their wild oats on the pitch and actually got it done on the field in terms of the match, haven't they? So, they have fixed 3 points, which is,
Well, it was later said that no immediate punishment will be given to the 12. Basically, if they suspended the 12 players, they're not going to have a team available to them. So, that kind of, it's ridiculous, isn't it? But the way I see it, the thing is, right, I think this team almost needed to get certain things out of their system. And have these sort of socializing bonding sessions are not a bad way of helping things. Look, I after that, then things did get out of hand by and large. But I did notice an improved performance on the field, for sure. It's almost as if, they were re-energized by it, maybe more focused, wanted to right the wrongs as well. At the end of the day, it's a scandal the club doesn't want, though. They've been, quite frankly, a mess for some time. The only thing they can do now is just keep getting results. If they keep getting results on the field, then, I'm not saying, certainly all will not be forgotten, but it will be eventually forgiven. So that's what they got to focus on now. I'm not saying they can have a sex party every week just to make sure they perform well, but I think clearly there has been an issue in terms of the personnel behind the scene. Bonding hasn't been there. I get why they would kind of, the dinner party was arranged, at least in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, there are sort of two sides to this. The one side is fairly amusing to a certain extent. There is the more serious part of it, which we don't really know the clear details of yet. There's certain reports coming out, so clearly we have to divide between, the humorous and the serious. But, in the light-hearted side of it, as you said, you've said they have won the game, haven't they? I mean, first time in a long time, and you said they played with a bit more freedom. I mean, it's their first win since May, so maybe there was a sense of letting off a bit of steam. And I think although we are joking a little bit, that the point you do make is quite true in terms of team building, isn't it? Like sometimes this sort of scandal, I mean, without knowing too much about the darker side of it, if there is a darker side, which we maybe we'll report upon as it develops, but you could be right to a certain extent, isn't it? Maybe sometimes having something else to focus on in terms of a big distraction around the club can actually add conversely, ironically, kind of help you on the pitch, because it takes away from the heat of the pressure of the performances. So, as you said, we're not advising on the Nordic Football Podcast that clubs start having drunken sex parties every week if they're in bad form or anything. But it's certainly. I mean, how's it gone down in Norway? Has it been the reaction been quite bad or?
Oh God! I mean, yeah, they're going to be. Yeah, they've been rinsed. They've been torn apart by their own fans. They were labelled as scum. When this sort of thing gets out, you're screwed, aren't you? No pun intended. They've been caught on CCTV, for goodness sake. There's no hiding place here. Really, all you can do is just try and perform on the field, and that was a good start. Whether or not I trust them to go on, they still look quite disjointed. But Haaland looks really up for the fight. He was giving it proper large at the end of the game when they beat Sandefjord. It was, he was celebrating like he'd won a cup. That was a big moment for him and for Brann. It certainly showed there's plenty of fight in the team though. And I've said all year they should have enough quality ultimately to survive. They go to the next. They go to Strømsgodset next, and they got Haugesund at home in a local derby, Lillestrøm, and then Tromsø, which is a big game. So they've got some winnable fixtures. There's a lot of new guys have come in, and who knows, they might be galvanised. I feel like the Sex Party might be their sort of their lowest low point, and now there's going to be, they can only go upwards from there. They're not going to be able to sweep this under the carpet. But it is what it is, and the club, on the field, 3 points on the board. They've just got to keep doing it.
Yeah, and you're right. The fans did hold up a banner calling them scum, which is, as you say, there is a bit of an unsavoury element to this. Fans are clearly outraged, and Hornlander said that he's incredibly disappointed that they have so little respect for the rules. And when you think about it as well, in this COVID times, I mean, it's kind of a bit weird, isn't it? That they're going to nightclubs and things like that. I'm surprised that nightclubs are even open in Norway, to be honest. But I suppose that's an update. In COVID times, maybe things are back to normal in the world. So yeah, it's almost a throwback, isn't it? To sort of
the social. Yeah. I mean, I think that I don't know what the local rules are for that. Obviously, the no alcohol proviso was severely abused in terms of the drugs as well. I mean, in terms of the actual. The sex party interaction as well. There's certain elements there that you can have social distancing to a degree, can't you?
I mean, we'll wrap it up now. I mean, the last point on it really is the fans that refused to cheer some of the goals. Report according to the Daily Mail, there's also said that some of the players were said to be in tears at full time after the emotion of such a shameful event in the club's history. So I'm sure this story will run and run. They've got some big games coming up, Strømsgodset, Haugesund, Lillestrøm. Let's see if they can recover, or let's see if this takes a time for the worst, because, as you said there's some allegations that could make this story from a sort of a nice ticklish story to one that could actually end up being quite serious. So we'll move on. We're going to wrap this podcast up now with a bit of a bonus, what we tend to do on Patreon for our bonus episodes. We haven't had a Patreon-only blog for a while. You can join us on Patreon, support us, patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast if you like what we're doing and you want to support us in that way, buying us a beer or whatever financially, then you can support us from as little as, I think, £3 per month or whatever. So we're more than welcome if you want to. And we do have some really loyal, incredible backers on Patreon who we're going to give a shout out to in the weeks to come. Again, you know who you are. But for this week, Steve, we thought we'd just open it up because it's a bit of a later show this week. Looking ahead to the weekend now. So this is sort of part 3, maybe you could call it. And we're going to sort of skip ahead now and let's turn our heads from backwards to forwards. And we're going to do what we normally do on the Patreon only show, which is we're going to select some games and give our predictions. So we're going to keep it a bit shorter than we normally do on Patreon. We normally select 3 each, don't we, Steve? But on this one, we're going to just select 2 each. And what we do is we pick 2 games that you should keep an eye out for. And of course, if you are over 18 and you do gamble responsibly, then we also sort of open up for you to maybe have a little cheeky flutter. Meatman Soccer is a betting analyst and expert, so you are in the right place for his tips. And as I say, on Patreon, he provides them fairly regularly when we do the shows. And we've got a pretty good success rate this season so far. So let's see, with 2 each, two bullets in the chamber. Let's see what we can do, Steve. We'll start with Norway, as we are in Norway right now. 2 bullets in the chamber. I'm just going to read to you the fixtures so that fans or anyone listening to this can kind of get an idea of what games are coming. So let me just do that right now. We have 21st of August, which is this weekend. Stabæk against Mjøndalen and Strømsgodset against Brann. It's 22nd of August, Sunday. Bodø/Glimt against Kristiansand. Haugesund at home to Lillestrøm. Sandefjord against Tromsø. Vålerenga against Viking, Battle of the V's, and then Rosenborg Odd. So, Meatman, take it away. Where do you see the value?
Can I just say, I think you could do worse than actually backing an accumulator of over 2.5 goals in every single match this weekend in Norway. I think there's going to be a lot of goals. Probably the one that might be under is Stabæk Mjøndalen, but even that could kick off into. But yeah, I think you could do far worse than backing overs in literally everything. But the two that stand out to me for good value over 2.5 picks are Haugesund Lillestrøm and Sandefjord Tromsø. Haugesund Lillestrøm because Haugesund matches suddenly become quite wild. Like 5-4 against Molde, 4-2 against Odd. They lost. They're suddenly not. They're not keeping clean sheets. It's an interesting one for. They just recently lost Ibrahim Avaji to Karabakh. They've sold him this week, so that's a goal score that goes out of the picture. But they've still got other scorers for them. I just don't think they're capable of defending very well at the moment. Lillestrøm are very much up and down in terms of over and unders, but their matches are very watchable. They're not like boring and closed. Even the Budig 1-0, there were plenty of opportunities in the game before then. Over 2.5 goals can be backed in this game, Jonathan, at a decent price at the time of recording. 1.98, nearly even money on just over 2.5. And I just think there's three. I think both teams score, and there's at least 3 goals in this one.
Yeah, I mean, accumulate. I don't know what the odds would be for that if you backed it in every game, but certainly if you've got a spare kroner or something like that, maybe go for it because Neat Man, you do have a bit of form. Who else have you got? Who's your second pick?
Yeah, it's Sandefjord Tromsø over 2.5. There's been a lot of overs recently, by the way, in Norway in the last sort of month or so. There's not been many unders at all. It's the time of year when goals do tend to flow a lot more. When the weather's good and it's not, the pitches are in better state, and it feels like the right sort of environment for the players to really get their attacking stuff out there. But yeah, Sandefjord Tromsø. I see it being an open game. Tromsø tend to play better football on the road. The Mjøndalen match summed it up when they won 3-2. Sandefjord are in a nice sort of comfortable mid-table spot at the moment, 20 points on the board. They can they're a tough side to predict in terms of who wins their games at Sandefjord. Like, who would have kind of seen them losing against Brann? I think a lot would have predicted them to get a good result there. It kind of sums them up. You don't know which version of Sandefjord is going to turn up, but a lot of their matches do contain goals. Even the unders probably should have ended over, but I feel like they're in a phase at the moment where they're happy to attack. They're not as focused on defence. Again, I see it like a match where both teams score, maybe 2-1 to someone or 3-1, even a 2-2 draw. But it's the price, again, that kind of catches my eye, Jonathan. Over 2.5 goals. You can get over even money on this, 2.04 at the time of recording. So 2 nice little value overs there for Norway Eliteserien.
Fantastic stuff, and that is why you bring the value on the Nordic Football Podcast with your predictions. So we're going to move it over to Sweden now. I'm going to read you the fixtures. We've got Malmö Degerfors on Saturday, Halmstad Norrköping on Sunday, Elfsborg Hammarby on Sunday as well, AIK at home to Beck or Häcken, Örebro Sirius as well. That's a sort of a big game at the bottom of the ends of the table. Then we have on Monday, Djurgården Mjällby. That's a repeat of last week, by the way. Last week's game. So some of these games are actually repeats because we're into the second half of the season now. IFK Göteborg against Varberg Boys and Östersund's Kalmar. Now, looking for some value there. I mean, we did have Wasson. He asked a question about Kalmar. My first pick for you, Steve, is going to be Kalmar to beat Östersunds. I just think Östersunds are in major trouble, to be honest. We do have a special guest coming on the show, which I will announce probably next week, who just happens to have just left Östersund. So we will talk about that a little bit more, on Twitter and that kind of thing. So follow us on Twitter. But Östersund's 2 wins in 15 this season. In the transfer window, they lost some players in the transfer window, and that really has just compounded their misery, to be honest. Had 1 or 2 injuries as well. They've not won since 22nd of May against Sirius. And prior to that, their only other win was in April against Örebro. Really, really poor run of sort of 6 defeats in the last 7 games. Lost against Norrköping at the weekend just gone. And before that, 5-0 at Häcken. And now in the cup, this week just gone, they've also been knocked out of the Swedish Cup. Steve, in the preliminary rounds, I mentioned the AFC Eskilstuna going out. Well, Östersunds have also, been sort of given a bit of an upset in that one. lost to Brann, of course, who were in the 3rd tier. So, things are just sort of going from bad to worse. Staff members leaving, as I've just, sort of mentioned, a bit of a teaser there. I just think that Kalmar, they're going to be a little bit too strong for them. Of course, they do have fans back, Östersunds. Maybe, they're not the biggest supported club in the world, but they, maybe some of their fans can G them up. But I just feel like Kalmar, their sort of attacking style, the way they play football, they're not in a bad spell of form. They lost 3 games in July, 3 on the bounce, but that was against Häcken, AIK, and Djurgården on the spin. Since then, they've beaten Mjällby, beaten Norrköping away, which was a big result, and then obviously drawn with Halmstad, who seemed to draw with everybody. So I just feel like Kalmar will be too strong on this one. They did draw 0-0 on the opening day of the season, and Kalmar had a decent possession in that game, but couldn't get a winner. And I did mention Kalmar a little bit, unreliable maybe in goal scoring wise, but I just feel like Östersund's form is just going to continue, so I fancy that one.
Even money you can get on Kalmar there. Do you know what? I'm intrigued at how you can get a price of 1.89 on the Halmstad match under 2.5 goals. 13 out of 15 of their games have ended under 2.5 this season. Although I must say, the one of the fixtures that did end over was the one against the Norrköping, and that's who they're playing this weekend. Can Norrköping suck them into a shootout? Sometimes teams can tempt sides into a shootout, but surely Halmstad are just going to play for the 0-0, aren't they? As normal, that looked a big price to me. But your second selection is in the Malmö match, isn't it?
Yeah, you talk about Halmstad, 11 goals scored, 12 goals conceded. Like you say, very low scoring. Maybe you fancy a bit of that, because that is, like you say, a decent price. Looking at their last sort of 10 or so games, 1-1, 0-0, 1-0, 0-1, 1-1, 0-0, 1-1, 0-0. Haven't been overs since the 17th of May against the Elfsborg. So, if you do fancy Halmstad to bore their way to a draw, or a low scoring game, then you can maybe, that is potentially decent value. But I haven't gone for that because Norrköping, they do like to attack, to be fair to them. They do like to go at teams. Rickard Norling hasn't quite got the blend right, but they have scored 20 goals this season in 15 games. And if you look at it, their last 4 in the spin have been overs. 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, 2-1. In fact, 2 wins, 2 defeats to Hammarby and Kalmar, and wins against IFK and Östersunds away. So I'm staying away from that one just because I'm not entirely sure it will be low scoring from Norrköping's side. So I've gone instead. I'm going to pick, this might be a bit of an outside one, but I do think there's a little bit of value in the Malmö Degerfors game in taking on Malmö. Now, my rationale for that is I think they're going to have all eyes on this Champions League. I think they will rest players. They have a few injuries, Malmö, as well. They took an injury tonight. Moisander went off injured, which is a bit of a blow defensively for them. They have had a few blows in that sense. They have had a few injuries creeping up here and there. And I just think that I'm not saying they're not going to beat Degerfors, but I do think, you might explain handicaps there, Steve. I think there might be value in terms of either a low-scoring Malmö win, maybe by 1 goal, or a draw, or maybe Degerfors to sort of cause a little bit of an upset because they just got off a big win against Häcken, 3-0. Now, they did lose 3-0 at Elfsborg the week before that, so that would give you maybe a little bit of cause for concern. Malmö are a very strong side, and their away record isn't great, but I'm not sure there, Steve. What do you think about that Asian handicap? Or, explain the handicap maybe for those who might not understand.
Well, the Asian handicap lines available for this game are a plus 1.75, which it would take me a while to explain that one. But a plus 2 Asian handicap, you can get a 1.68. Basically, if Malmö win the match by exactly 2 goals, then you would get your money back. If Malmö won by 1 goal, you would win the pick. So, if they won, 1-0, 2-1, and you're on the plus 2 Asian handicap, you will win your bet fully. So, and obviously you'd win as well if Degerfors were to draw or win outright. So, you got to ask yourself, are Malmö going to win by more than 2 goals? If your answer is no, then this is probably quite a safe sort of pick. It does feel like the sort of match where I think they'll probably be focused enough to just about win, but that's all they're bothered about. They're not bothered about goal difference and smashing someone and keeping intense right for the last until the end. They'd be happy with a 1 goal win or a very close or 2-0 or something. So if you like this, sounds quite promising.
I think there's two potential plays here. So I think either you go for that, like you say, the handicap, which you've explained very well there, or I would suggest you could potentially wait for the lineups, obviously, and then take it if you want to kind of be a bit more conservative. Or alternatively, maybe I'd be looking at the draw, a halftime draw, full-time Malmö market, because I think they will probably, the likes of Berman Savic. I mean, I'm just read a tweet from Serbian Football who've described it as one of the bargains of the century. That's quite an interesting tweet at Serbian Footy. Malmö saying one of the biggest robberies of the transfer market with Berman Savic. He may well be rested for this game. Kolak as well potentially could maybe find a place on the bench. Christensen as well. They've done it in recent games in the league. And so maybe potentially either Degerfors at halftime or a draw at halftime, and then maybe Malmö, they might bring on the big gun in the second half and sort of go for it then. So I think there is some value maybe potentially in Malmö not to win by more than one goal, essentially. So keep an eye on that. I wouldn't go all in on it, that's for sure. But as we always say, be responsible. Make sure you're over 18 as well, and make sure you take this advice wisely. Don't throw all your money at it, whatever, if you're going to. But just as a little cheeky punt, those are our two picks. So do you want to repeat yours, Steve, just to wrap up?
Yeah, over 2.5 goals, Holgersson against Lillestrøm and Sandefjord against Tromsø.
Yeah, and I've gone for Kalmar to beat Östersunds away. I think the price you said is around 2.0 or something like that, even ish, and Degerfors to do better than a 1-goal defeat, basically.
Lots of options for people there, basically, for that game.
Yeah, plus 1.75 Degerfors.
Yeah. Okay, well, a little bit of something different there for the listeners. That's what we tend to do in these Patreon pods, the extra ones, which we tend to do some more on, certainly for the rest of the season. So, but yeah, I think that's about it for this episode now, pal.
It is indeed. We've had scandals, we've had controversies, we've had threats and big rivalries. We've had big results from Malmö. So I think there's been a lot to get your teeth into in this episode, and hopefully you've enjoyed the analysis as well with Kalmar. If you haven't checked out our blog on Y Scout, Steve has written a very nice blog about Lillestrøm for our partners at Y Scout. So check them out. Thank you to our partners Y Scout. Check them out at Y Scout on Twitter, and you can go back and read our analysis of Lillestrøm. We do a tactical piece every month, pretty much. So that's pretty much it for the show. Thank you for listening.
Yes, take care, everyone. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.